What's up everyone, I'm NintendoCloud, and today you're watching my ranking video on ranking every single Nintendo system. If you guys do enjoy today's video, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe down below so I know that you guys want more rankings and top 10 videos. And without further ado, let's go. Few would actually recognize the Virtual Boy as a Nintendo creation, and even fewer actually owned the odd console. The Virtual Boy was designed to use stereoscopic 3D to create an early form of virtual reality gaming, but unfortunately failed to create a convincing enough experience for there to be much of an audience. Nintendo was actually very quick to fold on the console, actually discontinuing the Virtual Boy within a year of its launch in 1995, with only 22 games ever released for the system. And there's really no arguing that this is the least impressive of Nintendo's video game consoles ever. And coming in at our number 12 spot, we have the Game Boy Color. And as the name might suggest, the Game Boy Color was Nintendo's first handheld to feature a colored screen. The Game Boy Color actually arrived nearly a decade after the original Game Boy, providing not only a hardware upgrade for the system and for the more demanding games of the late 90s, but however, the system mostly served as a stopgap until the release of the next generation Game Boy Advance in 2001. The Game Boy Color still saw more than 500 releases in that 3-year span, though many of those games were still playable on the original Game Boy. The Color could also play classic Game Boy games and would give them a big color scheme to highlight their visuals. Putting aside the huge flop that was the Virtual Boy, the Wii U is Nintendo's least popular video game console ever. I mean, come on, confusing branding combined with technology that was only one step up from the massively popular Nintendo Wii hurt the Wii U at release. It was quickly outmatched by the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 when they both launched the following year. The Wii U's most innovative feature, of course, was the introduction of a large tablet that could actually somewhat be used as a secondary screen during gameplay or mirror the image of the television. With Nintendo's emphasis on family-focused gaming, the Wii U tablet was designed to allow children to play on the smaller screen while their families were using the living room television. However, when the tablet essentially turns into a brick when you walk out of range of the console, it makes it very limited indeed. The added requirement of developing games with the tablet in mind, and also Nintendo's lackluster online gaming infrastructure, led to a lack of games from third-party developers as well. The Nintendo 64 helped video games take the giant leap to 3D with a significant upgrade in power compared to its predecessor, the Super Nintendo. Nintendo titles like Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time defined a generation of 3D adventure games, while the N64 exclusive shooters like Turok Dinosaur Hunter, GoldenEye 07, and Perfect Dark were some of the best games in the entire genre. The N64 did indeed have its drawbacks though. The console has a much smaller library of memorable games than Nintendo's other classic consoles, and well, sadly, the graphics that once looked so impressive on the N64 haven't aged particularly well. The Nintendo 64 controller also helped to make analog sticks a new standard for future consoles, but the physical design of the controller is somewhat awkward by any modern standard. The Game Boy Advance was a strong follow-up to the Game Boy Color, significant improvement in handheld hardware. The 32-bit Game Boy Advance was strong enough to handle games that were once exclusive to home consoles, letting players take their favorite classics on the road. This also gave game developers a new chance to revisit some of the most popular genres of the 90s for a brand new audience. The GBA was fully backwards compatible with prior Game Boy games too, rewarding customers who were loyal to the family of handhelds. There weren't too many negatives to the Game Boy Advance that I can recall of when I used to play it, but when placed beside Nintendo's other home consoles and handhelds, the handheld didn't push too many boundaries. And some of the best GBA games were ultimately better executed on other home platforms. The legacy of the Nintendo GameCube is defined by some of its greatest games. Some, like Resident Evil 4, started as exclusives before making their way to future consoles, while others, like Mario Kart Double Dash, remain cult favorites to this day. The console itself wasn't particularly remarkable in terms of technology, but it did well in a competitive console generation that also included the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. The success of Super Smash Bros. Melee as a grassroots esports game lengthened the life of the GameCube, and its controller is still preferred by high-level Smash Bros. Players to this day. Nintendo released a new line of GameCube controllers in 2014 for the launch of Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, and the same controller can still be used to play the newest game in the series, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, on the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Wii had a massive cultural impact that extends beyond video games, inspiring a very new level of interactive gameplay with its motion controls. The Wii's simple pointing and touch controls helped it find a more casual audience than competitive players, and also innovative games like Wii Fit showed that the console could be used for fitness and physical therapy. The Wii remains Nintendo's best-selling home video game console, with more than 100 million units sold worldwide. However, the Wii does not have many memorable games of its own, and tons of lower-level quality titles ended up on the Wii in an attempt to capitalize on the casual audience. The console did have the benefit of backwards compatibility though, meaning that some of the better games from the GameCube era still had a home on the Wii. The main hardware innovation on the Nintendo 3DS was of course its 3D screen, which offers stereoscopic 3D images without special glasses or any extra accessories. However, the 3D features ultimately became one of the more forgettable parts of the console, only used by a handful of games to any meaningful effect. The Nintendo 3DS has succeeded as an upgraded version from the original DS, complete with backwards compatibility. The system is the first Nintendo handheld to actually utilize its digital content, with a digital shop that proved more worthwhile than the ones on the Wii or the Wii U. The console also made notable improvements to the DS's online functionality and overall data management system. With the upgraded hardware of the 3DS, developers have been able to make games specifically for the portable platform with few compromises. While the technology of the 3DS was not as groundbreaking as the original DS at its release, Nintendo's repeated revisions of the console have made it one of their most impressive. The second screen and touch controls of the original Nintendo DS helped bring about a new era in handheld gaming. Games designed for lower touchscreen gave the console a great casual appeal, while ambitious developers worked to create more engaging games that actually made use of both of the touchscreens. As a result, the DS enjoyed a wide variety library of games that were both unique and or impressive, offering experiences that couldn't be matched on a regular home console or even the PlayStation Portable, which on paper was a way more powerful console. The Nintendo DS was Nintendo's very first handheld console with the horsepower to actually run 3D titles, allowing for ports from the Nintendo 64 and some original 3D titles. The original Model DS was also backwards compatible with the Game Boy, giving the console a extended catalog with a number of classics dating all the way back to the Super Nintendo. While the Nintendo Switch is still a very young console, it has succeeded in blending some of the best of Nintendo's handheld and console offerings into a single package. In portable mode, the Switch functions like a way more powerful Game Boy but with a touchscreen, but the controls can also be separated from the screen for a two-player experience. When at home, a docked Switch functions as a modern TV game console. With the Switch, Nintendo has also managed to correct some of the online infrastructure issues that plagued prior Nintendo consoles. The eShop feels more functional than ever on the Nintendo Switch, and the wide variety of digital titles addresses the problems the Wii and the Wii U faced with third-party support. And even though it's been about 2 years since the console itself launched, the Switch has already had its fair share of amazing games, including The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. If the Switch keeps up a healthy pace of growth and developers continue to support it, it could slowly climb this list and become Nintendo's best home console. Whereas the Nintendo Entertainment System helped bring video games into homes across the world, the Game Boy made it possible to play just about anywhere. And like the Nintendo Entertainment System before it, the Game Boy created a baseline for every Nintendo handheld console that would eventually follow it. The basic sturdy design, reliable functionality, and a huge library of Game Boy games helped the basic hardware stand on its own for nearly 1 decade. Despite more technicality, advanced competition from handhelds like Sega's Game Gear, for a time Nintendo's console was literally synonymous with just about any portable gaming console, with just about any handheld gaming device being quickly known as the Game Boy. And for a while, it was the best and, well, only way to play the original Tetris. While the black and white graphics of the Game Boy may not appeal to a modern gamer, the console helped establish the market for portable gaming that has, well, benefited the industry as a whole. The impact of the original Nintendo Entertainment System cannot be understated. While arcades helped popularize video games as a hobby, the NES was the console that really convinced the world that it was possible to bring their games home and start building a library. Furthermore, with developers no longer limited to building games on a pay-to-play arcade model, NES games were built with more depth and replay value in mind. Some of the most popular franchises in video game history actually got their start on the NES, from Nintendo's own Super Mario Bros. And Metroid to third-party series like Castlevania and Final Fantasy. The Nintendo Entertainment System became the prototype for every gaming console moving forward, and helped make video games as a whole a household hot commodity. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System is Nintendo's definitive console that helped solidify the company at the center of the video game industry. In the terms of its hardware, the Super Nintendo made meaningful improvement on every aspect from the original NES. From a sleeker controller with a lot more buttons to game carts with many times more storage space for some bigger games. The games improved as well, as many of the basic games that found their roots on the NES arrived on the Super Nintendo with fully polished sequels that made a lot more sense of use of full additional processing power. Despite considerable competition from the Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo delivered dozens of unforgettable titles that still stand the test of time today and deserves the #1 spot on this list.